Hello, Renee Flamont here. You guys, this topic is so vast that I've been sitting here for like a half hour, just wondering where I'm going to start. So I narrowed it down to the title there, Enablers or Helpers, because if you have anyone in your life that you're dealing with, that you keep company with, that's in your family, in your circle, with your friends, whatever, that is suffering from some form of mental illness, and we are going to unpack all this. But if you have that person in your life, then you play a role in theirs. You are either, maybe you ignore it, maybe you help them, maybe you're an enabler, maybe you're. And I want to look at that spectrum because I'm struggling. I don't know if you struggle. I definitely struggle. What is the line up to which you should go in helping somebody, but not past which you should go so that you're not enabling them, which we know is bad? It's unbelievable. And the spectrum of mental illness we'll dabble into a little bit, but this isn't like a medical channel. But I did look up the symptoms of a lot of different things that I find curious, which we'll get to in a second. The first thing I want to say, though, is I think that people often say, well, go to therapy then, as a piece of advice. I've always said I put therapy and braces in the same category. They both cost money because mental health therapy is generally not covered. So it's like $150 out of pocket if you go, right? An hour, let's say. So they both cost money, therapy and braces, and even if you don't think you need them, everyone can benefit. Because no one's mind is perfect and no one's teeth are perfect. Everyone can benefit from both, whether you get them or not. Well, when it comes to therapy, a lot of people throw. I have a friend who's a therapist, and her piece of advice is usually, well, did they get therapy? Of course, that's going to be her advice, and I believe in it. I've gotten it too, but I did have to say one time, I just don't think they can afford it. Well, and then of course, I know we all know the pitch of, isn't it worth it, and you can give up this, and okay, fine. Some people don't have $150 a week, $600 a month to go once a week. They don't have it. So those people are left in your life, my life, our lives out there without any tools to guide them. And I think oftentimes they're mistakenly not understood. I've been guilty probably of not recognizing somebody might have something actually wrong with them. They might look like the neighborhood crabby apple. They may have a disorder. They might have gone their whole lives without a diagnosis. Remember, a lot of the words we all have now, they're newer. So I think of this all the time. I think of like grandparents, those family generations, they didn't have any of this. So in the family, when there's a story about someone and this one was crazy and that was you got to think, were they bipolar? Were they autistic? We didn't have that word. Not even when I was young. We didn't have bipolar. The first time I ever heard any word in that capacity was the word manic, and it was in a news story connected with Patty Duke Aston, who I loved as an actress. So I saw a news clipping. We're talking early on, 80s. She came out with this whole, and that was very educational. It was the first time I heard the word. And from then on, every time I saw her, so you learn that there are these different things. Well, I think today, I don't like when people abuse the system. And I'm not a doctor, and I'm not sitting here saying that everybody who gets a certain diagnosis has abused the symptom, the disorder, the system. But I also know people who maybe typed, it takes nothing to figure out what the symptoms are. Go tell a doctor that you have them. You just look them up online. That's how my mind works. And then you get a prescription that you needed. I just think that there's no blood test to show all of this spectrum of mental disorder that we have today, this entire broadness, right? And I think that when you have somebody who does make the effort and does have the money and is going to therapy, well, now you have people that can lie to their therapist. And so you might say, well, Renee, I don't understand. What are you trying to say? What can we do? We come in as being, are you enabling them or are you helping them? That's the only thing you can do, I think, as a, we'll call it civilian in the world of the mental illness. You're a civilian, unless you are the therapist. Maybe one of you is a therapist to somebody. But I'm not. So I'm just a civilian. I'm a bystander. I'm with anybody with mental illness. I'm not their doctor. I don't, right? But I can see some people that don't go to therapy who probably should. They have a lot to unpack, and maybe they would live a better life. But you're not going to tell somebody if they're past a certain age, they've lived this way their whole life, they don't think there's anything wrong with them, like a narcissist that we normally talk about. This fits right in. So when you have a mental health situation or a disorder among you, are you somebody who thinks you do too much? Are you helping them so much that they're never going to learn on their own? Are you just keeping them company so they don't feel alone? That's a lovely thing to do for someone. But I know a lot of people that I've seen enablers, and I don't think it's the healthiest way to go. So I wanted to bring this up because maybe we can wake you up and maybe you'll say, yeah, you know what, maybe I am enabling. Because it comes from a good place. It comes from a caring place. It comes from a I want to fix you place. But when somebody does so much to help somebody, it doesn't leave the person knowledge or a way or a path to figure out how they can manage on their own. And then not only is money and effort and enablers issues under the umbrella of mental illness, because it involves so many things, you also have people, and we'll get to all of it, but you have people who fake crazy. I've known people who have done it. Dramatic failed attempts at suicide, admitted to me later that they were for attention. Yeah, that's happened. I've known people. I mean, I worry more about what it takes to go through the process of that planning and that thinking. Like, why? But these are insecure people with very low self-esteem who need to find and feel loved. So then you got to say, well, what in you is that? So it gets labeled as a disorder because you got upset and do you know what I mean? So the system is getting abused, and now I heard somebody the other day say bipolar, like, and like they dismissed it as something not real. Now, I've known people to be diagnosed with bipolar. I'm not a doctor. I don't know if they really are or not. The word itself has symptoms that you can look up. When you read the symptoms, just to use this one example, there's anything that I've ever felt, you've ever felt, anyone's ever felt. But I guess what they look for is, erratic behavior, changes, up, down, and all that. Okay, fine, you can look it up. But it makes some people wonder, and I've heard the same thing said about ADHD, and that can't be real, and the kid just needs to behave, and somebody with bipolar, well, they're just depressed. We used to call it depression, so snap yourself out of it. So that's one end of the spectrum where they're ignoring it. Because it can be real. Now, is it up to us to figure out if it's real or not? No, but it is up to us, I think, if you know somebody that exhibits real signs and you're worried about them, to get them to help. And maybe, I don't know if it's allowed, but sit in on a session so that they don't lie to their therapist. Because I know somebody that we don't really talk much anymore, but they were still going to the same therapist for 10 years. They have not gotten better, they got worse. So I said simply, you not getting better tells me a couple of things must be true. Either A, you're lying to your therapist, or you're lying to me about being honest with your therapist, or your therapist is bad. Like, I don't know, there's a lot of things it could be, but therapist is bad as a joke. That's not a good joke. Let's assume the therapists are all bright, right? But if you lie, you're not going to get anywhere. So therapy's a tricky monster because somebody might use it as, I'm so self-evolved, I go to therapy. I know somebody that's so angry in life, he looks up who to argue with on the line, like gets on these pages and stuff, and he talks to his therapist about fishing. You're paying, they'll let you talk about whatever you want for the hour. Anything you want. They want you to come back as much as you want. So I think that getting therapy is a wonderful tool, but it has to be monitored if there's somebody that's showing this mental illness, and that's how we can help them. You get them to somebody who can help them, and you sit in on a couple if you're allowed and make sure they're telling the truth about the behavior that's concerning you that made you bring them there. Right? I think that it's the cause of a lot of things that go wrong with our youth today. It cannot be somebody that doesn't suffer from something in the mental illness umbrella. There's got to be something real that somebody gets to make them shoot up a school. That's got to be a mental, that you can't tell me that that is a normal thing, that a normal, well-adjusted person with a sense of right from wrong would do that. So to me, but then don't they say, if you have a sense of right or wrong, then you're not crazy. But that to me, I don't know. I don't know how to help people unless we see something and then we do something active and get them to the therapy if it can be gotten. If it can't, if money is scarce, let them talk to somebody older than them that they respect. Let them talk to somebody in your church. Let them talk to somebody in your circle, a friend of yours. Communication, get the child to speak and open up. I think a lot of people ignore it. Oh, that kid is weird. Oh, that kid's weird. This kid's weird. These girls are weird. And then before you know it, bullying happens, people get hurt. It was ignored until something huge happens. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know, but I also know that it's a problem for so many, and I empathize, but I just wonder why it can't be caught sooner where we can help people. Like when you read about a lot of these crazy stories, where was their first signs? Do you know what I mean? I've known people, this is another thing that I worry about with mental health, where we can enable. I've known people who get diagnosed and wear their diagnosis as like a badge. And they feel destined to be that forever. Now, I think the badge sensation comes from a place of they've always felt out of sorts, always been leaning towards like the depression side, moody teenager, like you could see it coming, it was brewing. But is it for attention getting? And was it for attention getting? And was it serious? And when did it get serious? Well, if somebody always behaves these characteristics, then that could be somebody that wanted a diagnosis so that they felt normal. I think that can happen. And that's that bad sensation I get from this person. Like, they say it proudly. They're not embarrassed to have the diagnosis of being bipolar and depression, I think it was. Not embarrassed, kind of proud that there was a name to what they'd been feeling for so long. My concern was I sensed in that pride that they were going to wear that for the rest of their lives. They had an answer, they had an excuse for their behavior. There was a medical diagnosis now. She wasn't just off or crazy or, you know what I mean? Pardon me, I have an itchy nose. Get into a fight or kiss a fool. I feel like when that happens, now you have people around her that she's going to try to make sure they see her that way. like it was almost like, hi, my name is, and I'm a blank. Like it was very much at the top of a conversation, which I applaud, taking the reins of trying to figure out what's wrong with you. But I also think medication is thrown out as an answer very, very quickly. And I think the work of what brought her to that point is never done. They got a diagnosis, great, let's move forward and treat it this way. But there's got to be reasons that people are that depressed, or that, and some might say right here, insert comment one here, Renee, no, there might not be a reason, it might be chemical. I understand that, I've read about that. I have, and that's a shame. But I think that when it's a chemical imbalance, that there are medications that they can get on as well. And God help those if the side effects don't agree with them, or it's a dangerous slope. I worry about doing the most that we can to help anyone that has any kind of mental illness, and also not enabling those that might be squeaking the system a little bit. It's terrible that this happens, but it does. I mean, I think too many times too, if there's a person that's diagnosed with a mental illness, probably in their circle, they're not the only one with any kind of hang-up. Very oftentimes in an immediate family, there's more than one person with a disorder, because this person creates this person, creates this person, and there's a chain, there's a link, you can see it a mile away. So when I think about this person now around certain people in their circle, I can tell you right now, I know two people that definitely will enable the situation. And not, it's okay. Not, instead of trying to raise her up, I think that they will try to push her down. And why? That's where their mental illness comes into play. Because then, if the person was raised too far up, they wouldn't need the enabler anymore. Right? So the enabler needs them. The enabler needs them to be exhausted, and I did all this, and I'm blah, blah, blah. The enabler has their own disorder. So there are many cases where they will try to encourage you to, it's okay, you go ahead and lay in bed all day if you want, 12 hours, you go right ahead, no problem. 4th day in a row, no problem. I'll do the laundry, it's okay. Rather than pop open the blinds and make them stand up. I think that there are enablers with their own mental illnesses that then bestow, that comes out, manifests itself onto somebody with a mental illness as, you need me. I serve a purpose here, you need me to get well. And they don't want you, I think that if an enabler is around and there's motivation for them to help you within, even if it's not on a conscious level, if it helps them too, those are the ones you have to kind of, I think there aren't efforts made by those people to help somebody out of the condition. Like an extreme example is that Munchausen syndrome, where somebody makes somebody think that they're sick and they feel needed. It's a very big disorder. Not so much what I'm talking about here, but kind of that idea. So when somebody has a mental illness and somebody can fawn all over them in the family and let them be depressed and get them their medicine, and I don't know, it worries me for young people. And you know, when I feel, when people are even suspect of whether or not somebody has that, I am glad that the conversation is now open and people do come out and say, well, I was this and I am that. But some people are suspect with the diagnosing process, and they can just look up symptoms. I've known people that have looked up symptoms and said, well, if you just tell your counselor this, then they da ba 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 ba. If you just say this, they want to hear these words. And I think, you know, for some things there isn't a blood test. So you are going by what a doctor and patient revealed to be true about somebody. And I feel that when a prescription follows a diagnosis is where we get into a lot of problems as well. I feel like diagnoses have come upon so fast. I've known people go to the doctor once, twice, and they get told they're a word, they get given a pill, and the people around them applaud it, and they think that's great. Maybe this will help that person. And maybe it will, and maybe they are that diagnosis. But pardon me, I think when you throw in an enabler, like the person that I know does have, not only do they nurture the diagnosis with the person, they really flat out don't want you to get better. Because then that would mean that you don't need them anymore. And that fuels their mental illness. It brings up their mental illness. Why do they need you so badly to need them? This whole cycle is terrible, but it happens. There's so much involved in mental illness. I see it everywhere. It comes up every day. In the news, in something. And I feel that if we think of the people before us who were never diagnosed, and they got through life. The world actually was simpler. We've always had crazies, I guess. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that Hitler probably didn't have some kind of negative disorder. I would think that we'd probably call him something, right? But I jump right to the worst. But what I'm saying is, think of an aunt, a grandmother, a grandfather, like you thought they were crabby. Or think about a kid in high school. Maybe you guys thought he was weird. He might have had autism, which we didn't have that word then. He might have been bipolar. We didn't have that word then. And then people get picked on for something. And then it turns out it could be a diagnosis. So we have to find a fine line between helping a person and enabling a person. And I struggle with it. Because if you get the sense that somebody is snowing you or pulling, it can happen like, oh, I'm just so tired. No details necessary, but you know what I mean? And it can get frustrating. And somebody's milking it, or they're really starting to take advantage of you because you were trying to help. You turn the corner into maybe almost enabling them, and now they expect you to be there, and when you're not, then they get mad. So all appreciation is out the window. It used to be, thank you so much for coming by. Now it's, why didn't you come by twice? We have to be careful we're not helping them by enabling them. And the person that I know that's in my mind was what brought this video to light, because that will not be doing that person any good at all. I think they could, I'm not going to say talk yourself out of getting better if you can't afford therapy. That's not what I was going to say. But you can look up videos on YouTube. You can do reading on your own. All these things are free. You can read, you can watch YouTubes, you can get help in other ways. And I feel that if they have the right people around them who are holding them up but not doing it for them, that's our best bet to help, especially the youth of today. Mental health is a very tricky topic. And at some point or another, everyone's felt not quite themselves. And some people have the ability to pull themselves up, and others don't have the ability. It's too much for them. Some people, things are too much for them. Everyone has a different tolerance point. I know people that can handle this much, and I know people that can handle this much. And on certain days, I've been here, and I've been there, and everywhere in between, and so have all of us. I don't know the line over which mental illness is the diagnosis, and you're just someone that didn't go to therapy. Maybe you have that diagnosis, but you never went to therapy, so you didn't get it. So I don't know the difference of what those two people look like on Earth, but recently I had somebody who really wore it as a badge, and I found that disconcerting. I was happy that it gave them some peace, but then I thought, okay, well, maybe this will wear off. Maybe this is a novelty right now. They just heard this, and maybe it will wear off. Which I hope, because I don't want anyone to associate themselves with their disorder. Even if they are diagnosed with something, you are not that. So if you're somebody that's been diagnosed with somebody in struggling and dealing with things, and I know there's people that challenge certain ones of these, whether they're real or not. I've read all of it. This video would be 8 hours long if we got into all that, but I'm sure you have as well. You can look that stuff up. People challenging each other, that's not a real disorder, that's not a real thing, that's not... If somebody feels off, just be there for them, but don't enable them. You can't not allow them to try to fix themselves. Positive words, positive reinforcement is, of course, what we all seek, right? That's what we all seek. And I just get concerned when I think of young people. I have heard more young people diagnosed with mental illness things than I ever knew in my life ever growing up. And a lot of things, like a list of things. They're this, they're this, they're this, they're this, they're this, take this medication. Let's try to help them and not enable them. That's the point of this whole video. I thank you for watching. Minnie has been out like a light. She had a rough week. She had an eye situation. She scraped. So she had a cone on her head and she's exhausted. So I haven't been making her turn around, but she's fine now. She's fine. I thank you for watching. Please go ahead and hit some like and share, and I will see you next time.